Well, today is the 12th of September, and we're off to see the little hamlet of Mount Hanley, Nova Scotia. This has the distinction of being the hometown, the birth town of Joshua Slocum. Many people may not have heard of Joshua Slocum, but he was the first man to sail around the world alone. And this is back in the late 1800s. He was born in 1844, I believe, and lived in Mount Hanley for the first 8 years of his life, going to the school there, before moving with his family down to the very end of Digby Neck, past the place where we were at yesterday for Balancing Rock. He was a further ferry ride down the peninsula, and his grandfather was the lighthouse keeper down there. When the school in Mount Hanley closed, the new owner made it a museum, and almost everything was left intact from even from the late 1800s, records and such. So there is a museum. As it's the off season and we haven't made any advanced arrangements for it, I would expect that probably the museum is closed, but we'll be able to see the outside of it anyway. And I've been trying to find the exact farmhouse that he was born in, but I've not been able to come up with any information about that. I don't even know if people know which farmhouse it was or if it still exists. But Mount Hanley is not a very big place. It has a population of about 30 people now. So who knows, we may be able to come across somebody who may know some further information, a local. If not, we'll at least be in his hometown. When I was sailing on Prince Diamond, we came across Joshua Slocum's path when we were in St. Helena, because he stayed there. I'll put the year on the screen, but he was there briefly on his circumnavigation, and he gave a lecture in the restaurant and gardens of a place that we visited when we were in St. Helena, and we had lunch or dinner there, actually. So it was kind of interesting to get that much detail about that portion of his life. Anne's place over there is where the barbecue is going to happen. We're in Castle Gardens. Yes, well, as expected, it's not open at the present moment for us to take a look at, but we can certainly take a look around through the windows or whatever. A little outhouse in the back. That's a view through the front right window as we're seeing it. Joshua wasn't happy with a life on land and ran away from home temporarily at age 14 as cabin boy on a fishing schooner. He returned home but left for good at age 16 after the death of his mother. He crossed to England and worked his way up to chief mate on various ships. In 1865 he settled in San Francisco and took American citizenship while developing as a writer. While on a voyage to Australia in 1871, he married Virginia Walker, who went to sea with him, and the couple had 7 children, all born at sea or in foreign ports. Slocum had the 150-ton ship Pado, built in the Philippines, and this was the first of a number of self-owned ships. The Aquidneck was the last ship for his wife, who died of sickness in 1884 in Buenos Aires. 2 years later, he married his cousin, Henrietta Elliott. She was not the sailor his first wife was, and after a hurricane,
a cholera outbreak in the crew, a pirate attack, smallpox outbreak, and finally shipwreck in southern Brazil, she had had about enough. She would not sail again. But the crowning event of his life was to build the 11-meter-long gaff-rigged sloop oyster boat Spray, and then sail it around the world alone. The achievement was barely noticed at the time because of the Spanish-American War. When the war ended, newspaper interest began to pick up about what he had done. Slocum wrote about his adventure in his book, Sailing Alone Around the World, and the book was a hit. By 1909, Joshua Slocum was pining for the sea again, not finding any real fulfillment on land. On November 14, he departed from Vineyard Haven, Massachusetts, bound for Brazil in the Spray. He was never seen again. He had never learned to swim, feeling that swimming was useless. Yeah, they're referring to this plastic replacement down here.
So after taking a look at the schoolhouse and grabbing some video through the windows, we were getting ready to leave, and we saw a young girl walking along the road, and asked her if she knew whether the Joshua Slocum farmhouse still existed. She was a fairly young girl. She said no, she didn't know. And I kind of doubt that it does. I've never heard any reference to it. Although it would be something that I would like to find out, maybe from the Joshua Slocum Centennial Society that they mentioned on that plaque. They may have some more information. Well, our very good luck on this trip is now continuing in that we can go and see the tidal bore going up the river at the Fundy Tides Interpretive Center. This only happens, I believe, once a day, and it just so happens to be falling near midday at this on these days. Today it's at 12:40, and tomorrow it's just a little bit after 1 o'clock. So because they're constantly rotating these times around the clock, you could end up with a day where it's happening during the night, or late evening, or very early morning. So we've been very lucky in most aspects, particularly to the weather, which has just been superb for us. And now the tides are going to cooperate as well. So the next stop is going to be the Fundy Tides Interpretive Center.
Today the river is flowing the right way. Yesterday it was flowing against nature, which was really hard at the first of it, but then it got better. So right today it's flowing right. Now, while we wait for the bore, keep an eye out for eagles. We have a large population of nesting bald eagles. There's a nest about every kilometer along the river, so let's hope they know it's lunchtime and they're going to go out to eat. Now, for some history. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this observation deck is built on the remains of a train bridge that was completed in 1901. There was a drawbridge to allow ships to pass through. We are standing on pier number 2 where the drawbridge rested. The Bay of Fundy has the highest tides in the world. Just imagine, twice a day there's 160 billion tons of water that move in and out of the bay. All the freshwater rivers of the world don't discharge that much water daily. And the land mass of Nova Scotia actually bends a few millimeters each time the tides come in. But the reason for our extreme high tides is the shape of the bay. The bay is shaped like a funnel and is fairly shallow. The tidal waters are forced in and up. But the most important factor is the length of the bay. All bodies of water have a natural rocking motion. This is called a seiche. in the Gulf of Maine, Bay of Fundy area. This period of oscillation is 13 hours. So it takes 13 hours of the waters of the Gulf to slosh back and forth and up the length of the bay. This is very close to the tidal cycle of 12 hours and 26 minutes. This causes near residents, it amplifies the tidal height. It's like giving a swing an extra push. Burnt Coat has the highest recorded tide in the world. The park is 30 minutes north of here. The record high tide was 53.6 feet, which is 16.3 meters. A storm surge can make it even higher. During the Saxby Gale in 1869, the tide along the bay rose to 70.9 feet, which is like 21 meters. And there's still some homes that have the water levels in their homes. But it wasn't recorded, so it never happened. But it did. Okay, the Shubenacadie River is 72 kilometers long, or 44 miles. The name Shubenacadie, it's a Mi'kmaq phrase. It means where the ground nuts grow, and they are referring to wild potatoes. The source of the river is Grand Lake near the Halifax Airport. The mouth is north in Maitland, where it spills into the Cobequid Bay. And 30 kilometers of the Shubie is tidal. So when the tide is halfway in at Burnt Coat, it finally meets the mouth of the river. The tide meets the river current flowing out, and it can't get into the channel until enough force builds up to overcome the current. The tidal water piles up and forms a small wave that moves up the river, reversing the current. As the first wave, the board travels up the river, the incoming tide rushes in behind it. The board travels between 10 and 15 kilometers, which is between 6 and 9 miles an hour. You cannot walk quickly enough to stay ahead of the tide. The river rises 10 feet or 3 meters here in the first 30 minutes, and in 3 hours it rises 25 to 30 feet, which is between 7 and 9 meters. As the tide rushes in, the sandbars cover quickly, whirlpool rapids and standing waves form, and the current will increase to 20 kilometers an hour, which is 12 miles an hour going upstream. And it's the only place in the world that you can do upriver rafting, and we'll see some rafters come up. And if anyone's headed towards Truro today, you can also see a tidal board there, and it's at 2:17.
What time's it here today?
It's at 12:50 or so in that area. Does anyone have any questions now? Yeah, the wind has picked up some, so.
They say the fact that the wind is picked up is an indication that the water's coming, because the colder water hitting the warm sandbars seems to create a wind. So we'll wait.
I know it is. If the tidal board doesn't happen today, you've got bigger problems than that. Yeah, you should check them out, just in case. No, so I would check them out, and they're open, like once you're done here. Wind chill.
Yeah. It's very big bucks.
But that's not.
It's big bucks. Yeah.
But that's not like,
They sometimes come back together. I like that titanium.
Oh yeah. See, this is something we're going to plan well in advance, because there's only so
just
much
used to it.
space and all that. So we'll plan that well in advance.
Yeah, so that, I was like,
No. Yeah.
15 minutes late.
so now we're gonna go with.
Okay.
They've been in the water for quite a while. When they were used last.
We're doing it.
Oh, beautiful.
Before.
We were told to do it counterclockwise. So you were told the same advice? Give them the same advice? Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's coming around the bend.
Yeah, isn't that just put it? I'm just sorry for the driver.
No, it's just
White river coming towards it. Okay. Yep. It's off of that.
It gets a little bit bigger down there. It's always different. I never know what's starting like this.
several hours.
They say they can put 8 people on it because 8 people on the guy.
Looks like there's 8 on that last one.
Okay, so anyway, the event at the last viewing area was a little less thrilling than we thought it might be. So we were told that the shape of the river is different here, and sometimes this gives a better result. So we've come to Truro, to the viewing area on Tidal Bore Road, and so we'll see whether we have some better luck. There's lots of people here for the viewing. It's supposed to be happening here at about 19 or 20 minutes after 2, but because it was late at the other location, I'm guessing it's going to be late here too as well.